Hello, my name is Dante Renee, and welcome to the 10 Room Bizarro YouTube page where I talk about films that I believe need to be talked about more. Like tonight's film, this is 1980's Champagne for Breakfast. Beautiful poster art right there on the cover of this DVD. This is Champagne for Breakfast, and this says they called her Champ, and she was. On the front here, it says starring Leslie Beauvais. And you can see a couple faces like Candida. Um, and we have on the back here, yeah, Leslie Beauvais. We have also John Leslie in the lead role. And we have a couple other people in this film as well that you're definitely going to recognize who are not on the cover here or who are not listed name-wise. I believe her name is Candy Barber. Sorry. Right there. I believe her name is Candy Barber right there. But Dorothy LeMay also makes an appearance as well. And just keep your eyes out. This was actually written by John Hayes, and I love John Hayes so much. I've looked at some of his own films on this YouTube page, like Baby Rosemary and Hot Lunch, but it was directed by Chris Warfield, who was the producer of Sex World. So very interesting. We have direction here by a producer, and it's written by a director. But obviously they were Renaissance men, so to speak, covering a lot of different territory. Now this is 1980. Champagne for Breakfast. Here's the back of the DVD, and of course this is released by Vinegar Syndrome. Got some great shots there, and never heard of this film before, and Champagne for Breakfast, it's really, really interesting because it does not feel like a film from 1980. It feels like a film from maybe, 85, 86, maybe even 87. It kind of gives me that type of vibe. This is an X-rated film that has very high production value. There is just a lot of professionalism to this film. This would be really on a high echelon of adult cinema, with just from the storyline to the acting to the way the story envelops, and to the sets and the atmosphere and the sex scenes. This is a very high production affair. Champagne for Breakfast is a film that people who don't like X-rated cinema might still enjoy, minus the maybe some of the sex scenes, but the storyline they might find very interesting, comical, romantic. In many regards, just as a story, Champagne for Breakfast would really make itself out to be quite a great movie. Within the genres of, as I stated, we have comedy, romance, and kind of a dramatic element, most definitely, and a sex film. And a film that has a strong... I know it was filmed, in San Francisco. It really seems like that with the Golden Gate Bridge and everything. But it also gives me vibes of New York City a little bit. Really gives me a New York vibe. And so I could see this being a film, and really on the back here, it does say that there are hard and soft trailers and alternate soft cut scenes. So possibly this film, I don't know much about it, but maybe you can tell me, was released in a softer version as well. And you can kind of sense that. Champagne for Breakfast, right from the get-go, you realize that you are in for a different picture, a higher production XXX rated film. It says rated XXX on the front of the poster art there. And what beautiful poster art, once again. As the opening title sequence begins, you hear really great music. I mean, almost like Frank Sinatra-like music. And that's what really gave me a very strong New York vibe. Being someone who, when I was 16 years old and I had my first vehicle, I was actually, the first thing I put in the vehicle was Frank Sinatra's Greatest Hits. I was not your typical 16-year-old possibly, but And I just remember driving an Oldsmobile and feeling New York City a bit. Not just because of Frank Sinatra's song New York, New York, but just his whole vibe, his whole energy. And that's the way Champagne for Breakfast really starts off. Wonderful, just wonderful editing in the title sequence as well. Kind of, meshing multiple scenes at once, and something that will move throughout the rest of the film, which is elegance and it's just definitely, I think that's the right word, elegance, an aspect of elegance to this entire feature. Now, this is a 98-minute film. I'm sorry, this is a 102-minute film. So, also in that regards, a longer X-rated feature than most. We are documenting, and very interestingly so, the story not only of a very career-centered, go-get-em business lady named Champagne, but we are also looking into the life of a man who's a bit down on his luck, needs a job, has a frayed family relationship, which involves money and business deals, and is looking to further himself financially, and maybe possibly even with some type of career. And this is where Champagne and this gentleman's lives, we will find them connecting. But when the movie begins, stylistically, the interesting thing is that we spend a little bit of time in one world, and then we shift and spend a little bit of time in the other world, almost wondering, how will these two meet? How will these two worlds meet, I mean? And then all of a sudden, as the movie goes on, the two worlds collide, and they meet, and the story envelops. Now, musically speaking, we have that Frank Sinatra type music. We also have some strong jazz music in this film. Just great jazz, great kind of groovy, funky jazz in the movie. And this is a film that really, really looks good. There's amazing lens flares on, chandeliers and lamps. It's bright, it's clean, it's crisp, and it's elegant. Okay? It's very, very elegantly done. Not, I would say, not typical look for an X-rated film. Now, another thing is, we have great characters. Essentially, this is a film of characters. It's a film that explores the themes of career, and career can sometimes replace the passion of living. When your passion is career, when your passion is achievement, it can sometimes take away the time from actually living your life. And that's what Champagne for Breakfast really, one of the themes that it definitely deals with. Also, relaxation colliding with a focus of career and achievement, because the film essentially, while it deals with two characters, one character looking for work, entering into work, the other character, someone who is actually resting for the first time in a very long time. Now, Champagne for Breakfast has such great humor in it. There's a lot of humor involving homosexuality in the film, which might not be as popular today in 2018. But then again, X-rated cinema has never been, mainstream fare, and never been without its share of controversy in mainstream society, right? So these would be the films that you would expect, the politically incorrect, so to speak, the edgy. But especially for the time period. So we have just great humor in here. We have one kind of avant-garde scene in here which freeze frames. I almost thought there was something wrong with my DVD player. It just freeze frames, and then it continues on, but it's done to a comedic effect. Now, this is definitely one of the best roles I've seen John Leslie in. I mean, he is just, his character is so interesting and so unexpected. I mean, this is a character where some of the comedy can come from, hey, listen, I don't want to be involved with two women. What are you, a bunch of lesbians? So there's even joking about that, about lesbianism, not just homosexuality, with men, and the jokes are almost in the conservative nature, so to speak, of John Leslie's character, although he's not conservative at the same time, but he has a conservative freak. Now, the interesting thing also is that Champagne for Breakfast, while there is ejaculation and real intercourse, it's an X-rated film, there's also a lot of tease in this movie because that tease directly connects to the story of this film. We have almost this really awesome lesbian sequence that's about to envelop between two women, and another sequence which is about to envelop between two women and a man, and they both end quickly because of storyline elements. So there's a section of the film where John Leslie is blue balling and calls it something else in the film as well. And in a way, Champagne for Breakfast will almost at times make the viewer blue ball and tease the viewer. Now we have some great twists and turns in this film. The film involves a storyline about a limo driver, but also a security officer. I always love those types of vibes, and I think that's what gives me the New York City vibe a bit with the film. And even though this is a hardcore film, it gave me the vibe sometimes that it was a bit softer of a hardcore film than others, which I don't know if it ties into the alternate soft scenes that are on the disc here, and maybe the way it was released, but it really seems like a film that could have also been released as a softer film if you took out the hardcore sex, the hardcore sex in the film. There are great sequences in here. You're going to see some faces that you recognize. There's a face from a popular series named the Taboo series, and there's just John Leslie. I've always liked him as an actor. I really feel like up there with Jamie Gillis, he really has just a special quality about him, as if he would be acting in any film, not just sex films, but any film. And there's a lot of restraint from him. Now, that said, Leslie Beauvais, I've never seen her play a lead role like this before in Champagne for Breakfast. She's amazing. Absolutely love her. Plus, there's a very interesting kind of theme running through this film, of female liberation. But the limitations of female liberation, the limitations of freedom, the limitations of unhindered female sexuality. And Leslie, I always thought she was sexually attractive and just attractive. There's one scene in the film where she has her makeup off and she's kind of jogging with this kind of high school or college guy, and I always love her natural look the best. I always love her natural look the best. But you will be seeing her all throughout this film, just like you'll be seeing John Leslie throughout this film, and there's some interesting twists and turns, and even a kind of twist at the end of the film that takes on a vibe that you could even see some ladies liking. And there's possibly, in a way, you could have, as I said, not only people who don't typically like X-rated films, but also people, maybe couples, things like that, enjoying Champagne for Breakfast. That's not to say it's not a wild movie. It definitely is a wild sex film. We have the orgies, multiple guys and a girl, and the interesting thing is that we have multiple guys and girl, but we never really get the multiple girls guy in the film because of the restraint of the storyline and the characters. We have some very interesting things dealing with sexuality in this film and secrets. And even some cross-dressing. This is Champagne for Breakfast. Perfect title for this film, even if the character's name was not Champagne. There is an elegant quality to this X-rated film that moves through the music, through the titles, the opening titles and closing titles, and the acting, the storyline, the locations. you know, real kind of having that real 80s dramatic comedy sensibility to the film and a great storyline. This is 1980s Champagne for Breakfast. Thank you so much for watching the 10 Room Bizarro YouTube page where I talk about films that I believe need to be talked about more, like 1980s Champagne for Breakfast. Please feel free to check out my own personal films by Googling Apartment 1014 Films. Thank you so much, and good night.